Hello, good evening, everyone. Welcome. It's nice to see you all in the auditorium again after such a long time. And also welcome everyone online in one of the many live streams that we're doing on Zoom, on YouTube, or Vimeo. Today we kickstart the online public program of the Open Studios of the Jan van Eyck Academy 2021. And from today until the end of the Open Studios, you can always find us here from 7 to 9 p.m. Central European time, summertime. It's summer already. So for those online, please feel free to join us and find out another layer of the participants' presentations and the projects that they have been working throughout the year. In addition to that, I would also like to invite you all here and online to have a look at the Open Studios website, where you can find not only more information about the participants, but also about our public program and the lineup that we have ready for you, all of you. And also to check out the Fourth Garden, which is a digital platform developed collaboratively by a group of current participants at the Jan van Eyck, where there will be daily openings, digital meetings, in which people that cannot come to the Jan van Eyck physically can also somehow engage with the participants through chat and through video and sound. So please make sure to check it out. And also for the ones that are here that want to engage with some participants on one-to-one online, check it out. It's the fourth garden that's available on the digital Open Studio. So the website is openstudios2021.janvaneyck.nl. We also have an online screening program, so there's not a lack of material to see from your home. And in this online screening program that you can access through the Jan van Eyck website, you'll see a selection of videos of some of our participants. But today we kickstart the program with the writers program, and I'll give the word to Eric Lindner in a minute, and later on we'll have a performance lecture by David Habets with a few other guests. So welcome you again. Good to see you all here. And Eric Lindner, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Bruno. Well, we are here to, as in the first of 3 events, to present the writers that have been guests of the Jan van Eyck the last year. It's a bit more than a year because the last Open Studios was in March 2020. Like every year, I ask them to read something. It can be something they have written at the Academy. And I sort of mingle the writers from the writing program with the participants that I worked with the last year. And today we have Jente Postuma, who is the current writer in residence of the Jan van Eyck. I would call almost the program Occupying Jente Postuma because we took over her studio. She's now writing in her apartment. And she almost finished her period of writing of 2 months. Next to her is Inyas Kami, one of the participants. He combines writing and text, writing in art, writing about art, writing as art. And for me, he makes a bridge from art to literature, to writing. We have Persis Bekkering, and this is something special. I think we will have it every year, that we have a writer from the previous period again at Open Studios, because we will have a book launch at the end of this session. So Jente will read first, and Ignas, then Persis. About Jente, she published 2 novels, and I think in 2016 the book Mensen zonder uitstraling, People Without Appearance. Charisma. Okay, yeah. That was quite a it was quite a success when it came out. And then more recently, Waar ik liever niet aan denk, What I Rather Don't Think About. Here's the mid-price, and here's you can see the normal novel. And also in the year that you debuted, Jente, you've published with Bas Uterwijk, your husband, a book which I read this morning when I woke up. Probeer een beetje goed over me te denken. Try to think a bit good about me, or a little bit good about me. It's a book with photos and text, and Of course, Jente writes the text, but it's written in the first person as Bas, as her husband. I was very touched by it. It's because it's, it's about the death of the father of their husband, the self-chosen death, but it's written not dramatically, but very factual. And it also has to deal with, like, if your father-in-law was an actor and famous people are in the story, it is not about their being famous. It's their being named. And I think it is very, very well written. It's a beautiful book also, with photos of the people afterwards who, and the landscape where this happened. It's really a reminder, a recommendation, I must say. Today we have the first time, finally, people here. Welcome everybody. And we have people, of course, online, like Bruno said. And also special about today, because we present what people write during the Open Studios, is that everyone will read their work in English. They're all Dutch. No, sorry, one is Flemish. I'm very sorry, Ignas, but they will read what they've written in English. So I give the word to Jente Postuma.
Hi, I'm gonna read from my second novel. Eric just said the title. It's Waar ik liever niet aan denk, What I'd Rather Not Think About. It's about a woman who loses her twin brother. He ends his life, just like my father-in-law in the little book he just showed. The novel is a little bit based on that story, but it's completely different as well. To me, it's more about the person who stayed behind and not the one who ended his life, but it's about loneliness and the disability to connect to others. I'm going to read in English. It's a translation by Sarah Timmer Harvey. I'll just start at the beginning. Waterboarding, I told my mother. That's when someone places a cloth over your face, then pours water over it continuously. It feels like drowning. It is drowning. And you're going to do that, she asked. Yes. My mother sighed. This has to be one of your brother's ideas. We just saw a film about Guantanamo Bay, I said. Afterwards, he asked if I wanted to waterboard him. He wanted to know how it felt. And I said I'd only do it if he did it to me too. So that's the story. And how was it? My mother asked. We haven't done it yet. Since my mother had gotten old, her ability to listen had gotten even worse. Oh, yes, she said. I was watching a series on television yesterday, and the character I'd grown very fond of was blown up. That's why I slept so badly. We felt we should be able to lie in a reasonably comfortable position, so we decided to do it on my couch. My brother went first. He lay on his back with a red checked dishcloth over his face, and I stood next to him with a jug of water. Here we go, I said, pouring water over the cloth. After a few seconds, my brother pulled the cloth off his face and sat up straight. Maybe we should tie you up, I said. I tied his wrists together with one of my stockings and started over. We agreed that I would remove the cloth after 30 seconds. The timer on my phone was set. My brother gasped and tried to move his arms. He's drowning now, I thought. It took a long time for 30 seconds to pass, and when I lifted the cloth away from his face and he'd finished coughing, he said, "That'll do." I didn't want anything around my wrists. I wanted to be able to pull the cloth off my face whenever I saw fit. That's not how it works, my brother said. He tied the stocking around my wrists and placed the cloth over my face. The water ran into my nose and I couldn't breathe. I tried to get up and knocked something over with my legs. Once I was finally sitting upright, I shook the wet cloth off my face and wrenched my hands free. My brother handed me a tissue to wipe my face, but I shook my head, breathing in and out, again and again. Church bells rang. The alarm on my phone went off. Why didn't you help me? Sorry, he said. I felt like I was gonna throw up. Hanging my head over the toilet, I waited for something to come out, But nothing did, and I thought about the time I'd taken a guy home and how he'd pushed my head down. His hands were over my ears, and he kept pushing my head lower, and maybe he thought it was turning me on because when I pressed against his knees and tried to break free, he gripped me even tighter, and all I could hear was the thumping of my heart. And then I thought about the first time I'd ever heard someone say their heart was in their throat. It was my mother, and she had told someone that her heart was in her throat whenever she thought about what the future held for her daughter, because I was not a great beauty. She didn't seem to worry about my brother, the way he kept plucking at his scalp and the bald patch it caused. I can't remember when he stopped plucking, but after a while it was over, and his hair grew back. My son is capable of anything, my mother often said. One day he's going to do something extraordinary. After my brother was born again during a workshop, he said, "Life isn't a straight line, it's a circle. You can die and start over again." It was a workshop organized by the followers of Osho, who 20 years after his death still viewed him as a spiritual master, which was also the meaning of his name. "Osho," said my brother, "you know him, right? The man who used to call himself Bhagwan, which means God." Of course, I knew exactly who he meant. He was talking about the man who had been born Chandra Mohan, a common name in India, but as a child his grandparents had called him Rajneesh, which means King of the Night. Rajneesh would often go to the river close to his hometown and dunk other children until they were on the verge of drowning, then asked them how it had felt. As the Bhagwan, he said, "Hope is a drug. Only those who are ready to die will know a life full of love. Those who are afraid of death will never enter the mystery of love." He told the people who came to his ashram in Pune that they needed to surrender themselves. "If you walk away now," he said, "you might as well end your life." According to him, the urge to kill yourself was a sign of true intelligence and sensitivity, a desire to escape the suffocation of the ego. For those who recognize the pointlessness of everything, suicide or total surrender was the only alternative. This is basically what was written on one of my brother's favorite websites in short, oddly fragmented sentences, all lined up like a bad poem. The cause of Osho's death in 1990 is unknown. His body was cremated just a couple of hours after he died. Shortly before passing away, he claimed he had been poisoned in an American prison in 1985. There were also those who believed that he'd simply grown tired of living and asked his personal physician to administer a lethal injection. Incidentally, my brother later stopped believing that his life was circular. "We're at the beginning of an extreme weather episode," he said. "From here on out, it will only get worse." Sylvia Plath prepared bread and milk for her children and then stuck her head in the oven. Her daughter, Frida, was 3, and her son, Nicholas, had just turned 1. I'd read The Bell Jar for my modern English literature class and had been impressed. After everything I'd heard, I'd expected a syrupy, heavy story, but was surprised by the novel's light tone. My brother had also read it, purely out of interest, because he'd quit his studies 6 months earlier and was similarly impressed, though a little critical as well. "It was brave of her to take her mother's pills and hide in the crawl space at her parents' house," he said, "but it wasn't exactly smart." I said that he shouldn't conflate the protagonist with the author. He said I was naive, and that he would never end his life with painkillers. Never. The chance of failure was too great. I told him about Sylvia's friend, the poet Anne Sexton, who'd put on her mother's fur coat, poured herself a glass of vodka, and gone to the garage, where she started the car and died of carbon monoxide poisoning. Her daughters were 21 and 19. And Ingrid Jonker, another poet, who'd walked into the sea in Cape Town. Her daughter Simone was 11. My brother said he would never have children before kicking the bucket. Isn't that what everyone who has children does eventually? I asked. He didn't think that was funny. It's a crime, he said, to have a baby only to leave it. Of course, we both knew he was talking about our father, a man who'd left shortly after our 11th birthday because he no longer loved our mother and wanted to study mud in the Amazon region. During one of his excursions through the rainforest, he died suddenly from a brain aneurysm. Sylvia Plath's son, Nicholas Hughes, also killed himself, I said. He hung himself. Did he have any children? My brother asked. This I didn't know. He was a marine biologist, I said, specialized in salmon. I was pleased that, for once, I had the facts, while my brother had the questions. Furthermore, I could tell him about Ted Hughes' girlfriend, Assia Wevel, who'd killed herself in almost the same way as his wife, Sylvia Plath. Assia had also taken the life of her 4-year-old daughter. My brother was getting wound up. Virginia Woolf didn't have any children, I added quickly. Let's watch TV, he said. I feel like watching a stupid game show. He went into the living room and sat on the couch. I also knew that Virginia Woolf had put on a fur coat. She'd filled her pockets with stones and drowned herself in a river, just like my brother would. But I didn't know this at the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Jente. I just want to add that Jente will be back at the Jan van Eyck on September the 23rd, and she'll be talking to Esther Gerritsen, who's another celebrated Dutch writer, lately also making the lyrics or the words, the monologues for, well, certain, I forgot the name of the actors, but so there are more and more writers who write now for theater, which doesn't happen so much in my generation, but it's something which comes back. That will be a writer's talk, so then there will be also time for questions. This is just a reading. Next up is Ignace Kami, not Ignace, Ignace. And, well, we sort of established a long relation during this year, I think. Whenever I had studio visits at 9:30, always the same name appeared, Ignace. And sometimes I warned him when I was here, and I read quite a lot of his texts. And what is a surprise to me is that the English and the Dutch sort of have the same voice. It's my fault that if you change a language, you sort of change your style. But I think Ignace's style has two languages in a way. We have been working on a travel story in Vietnam, which somehow did not end yet, so it's a cliffhanger. I really liked his Lange Wapper story. There's a beautiful image to it too, of him as a boy holding spandoek, what spandoek? Protest sign that he promises not to be a hoover anymore. And it's about the story that Ignace as a boy was over the carpet hoovering all the dust on the carpet, which was really fascinating. I got a sleutelhanger. I'm saying all Dutch words that I don't know in English. It's such a thing, you know. Key? Chain, yeah. If you have this, you have something, you know, hanging on it. And he put it on the face of ducks. So you could hold your glass of wine at a cocktail party or an opening and have a very heavy duck of stone and all, well, ching with it. And then there's many texts for punk group songs, song texts. I saw very much narrative sides of Ignace, but then came the rumor about the clay. And I think most of you know this story. I think the rumor was spread by Aliki. And then when Ignace heard about it, that there was clay, he started to dig. He started to dig a hole. And also Inge Schilperoort, who will be reading at the end of this week on Saturday, but was at the same time as Ignace heard about it. And I hope you are going to make a book together about that with her writing. Ignace dug a hole in the garden, found the clay, let the clay, well, do something which I will not betray or not yet say now. And in the end, he set it on fire. So that was a sort of the outcome of his research. I always question myself, Ignace is a sort of short story man. He had a lot of stories I liked, but it never became one subject. But I think now the clay, and if you go to the open studios, to his studios, and I think everyone looking at us via Zoom or Vimeo or YouTube should go to Maastricht this week or the next week, you can see in his studio what happened. You can sort of be in the pit where he was. So now is the word to Ignace.
Thank you. The project is written as a journal. It's called A Sense of Direction, and I will now read it for you. First chapter, The Rumor. My hands have mud on them. So do my glasses, my pencil, and my notebook. I'm used to it by now. It has become part of the routine, ever since I heard the rumor. I had been steerless for a while, disoriented and shaken to the core. And just when I had lost all sense of direction, I heard the first whispers about the clay. Based on what I was told, it was to be found close by, deep in the ground. I knew for the first time in a while what I needed to do. I was not to go left or right. I was to stop looking back and planning ahead. I would have to go down, layer by layer, and look for it myself. The spot. In the middle of a wild garden, I found an open spot where only wild strawberries grow. I brought 2 shovels and 2 buckets. I need this, I kept telling myself on the way over here. And before I knew it, I had planted the shovel in the ground. Nice, clean scoops of soil piled up next to me as the late autumn sun licks my skin. I need this, I once again tell myself, as I plow through a square of roughly 1 by 1 meter. It feels right. The fauna and flora. The amount of roots I'm cutting through is astounding. It makes me feel bad for the plants to whom they belong. The small creatures that live in this first and fertile layer of ground will surprise you. I can see centipedes and woodlice scattering to the shadows as I lift yet another shovel of dirt. The snails and slugs are less bothered by the sudden return of sunlight. They seem to be feasting on things that I cannot distinguish from the earth itself. I found an earthworm the length of my forearm. As I picked it up to study it, it tried to take shelter in my left nostril. I pulled back at first, but then decided to see what would happen. The worm was much more eager to go inside than I expected, so I decided to pull it back out after a few seconds. I'm here to clear my head, not to fill it with worms. It felt nice though. I would recommend anybody to try it. The landfill. I'm hitting hard things now. Stone, brick, marl, big stuff. I love the sound my shovel makes when it hits these rocks. If I dig around them and create some wiggle room, my shovel can be used as leverage. That way I can free them up one by one. I am unable to lift them alone. I need to call in some favors. The skeleton. Finally, the soil is changing. I made it through 1.5 meters of rubble. If I stand up straight, my eyes are no longer above ground. All I see is earth and a clear blue sky above me. No more wind to cool me down. I notice that my shovel is going clean through some small pieces of stone. What is that? I need to switch to a more subtle approach. Might as well use my hands. Is that a tooth? Is that a jaw? What is that? I'm unearthing a wide variety of bones now. Will touching them make me sick? The teeth don't look human. What animal could this be? It looks like a canine to me, but what do I know, really? I should ask around. Asking around did not help one bit. If anything, it made it even more unclear. The clay. It took a while to sink in, but I'm digging up clay now. It's so different from the other layers. Darker, heavier. How did I not notice? I still can't believe it. It's actually here. Today, while I was digging, I got caught in a downpour. The heavy rain surprised me while I was down in the hole. Before I knew it, the water started rising and the strangest thing happened. The clay started singing. It was beautiful, as if it tried to tell me something. I took what I needed and got a whole lot more. It had been raining hard for quite some days now. I noticed that the walls are crumbling. The hole is now about 2.5 meters deep, and when I'm down there, I no longer feel safe. More and more people have started to show up. They want to see or even be in the pit. My pit. It feels like the right time to let go of this place I've come to love. I'm getting too attached. This calls for a ritual. The fire. I have collected some nice wood, a few packs of charcoal and some straw. Tonight, I fill the bottom of the pit with a layer of thick wooden beams and start preparing the coals in a wheelbarrow. When they are white hot, I tilt them into the depths of the hole. It's all or nothing now. Some friends are around and throw pine branches on top of the coal to make it ignite. Nothing but smoke, thick and blue. But then the sound changes and the smoke seems to sink back down. A fiery flash shoots out of the pit, about 1.5 meters high. In a few hours, we will cover the remaining coals with wood and straw before putting a good layer of dirt on top. This basic ground oven will smoke for a few days and bake the walls of the clay, marking the end of my journey and adding another layer of history to the soil. But for now, we celebrate. The closing. The hole has stopped smoking. The clay walls make a hard and hollow sound when I tap them. They still show marks of my shovel and imprints of my boot, but are now forever set in stone. Last night, I had a dream in which the clay sang once more. When I woke up, I knew that it was time. I put the skeleton in a box, put it in the bottom of the pit, and started shoveling. I did not stop until the pit was completely filled, ending the journey where it all began. I truly believe that if every person during their lifetime would dig a hole in the ground for no other reason than to just do it, the world would be a better place. Thank you.
Thank you, Ines. And now, last but not least, the last Utopia, which is a chapter from the new book Excess by Persis Beckering, who debuted before with the book Een Heldenleven, A Hero's Life. When I think of Persis, I think of someone very turbulent, who does a lot, but does everything she does very seriously. Like, if you read her first novel, she must have had, well, a career or a lot of knowledge about classical music. If you read her second novel, you know, must know all about rave and dance music and house and parties. And then having her here as a guest in the previous year at the Jan van Eyck Academy, she really got into the art field as well. So I think Persis does a lot, but everything she does with an enormous intensity. And I think this chapter written here, if Persis Beckering's residency was not 3 months but 6 months, you would have written an entire book in the academy, because in fact, the half of the book is written at the Jan van Eyck in the first draft. So we worked quite hard and intensely. And well, I'm very happy to present this year, finally, the last Utopia. I'm going to give you the first copy. But not before that, I've been holding a stand here in the printing and publishing lab, and every passenger or visitor of the Open Studios, which I repeat this year is very strong, the total Open Studios, but they come to pick up this and to take out this. And this is made by Martin Groch. I'm a bit too old for it, but everyone knows it, that if you see this, was an original, this is an artifact, this was an original dance party. I think Persis can tell it better than me, but of a dance party somewhere in London? UK, somewhere in UK. So that's part of the book. The last Utopie has an English translation by Susan Ridder. So it's both English, Dutch, and I will present it and ask you to read from it. Alsjeblieft.
Thank you for this beautiful introduction. The book is for sale from now on, or from tonight on, in the web shop of the Jan van Eyck. And yeah, it reads as a novella in itself. It's the novel that it's an excerpt from. Excess is built up of 5 episodes as I see them, and every episode is a story in itself. So you won't feel like you're missing something if you only read Last Utopia. The book is set in Berlin in 1992. The rave scene was very happening then, so that's the background of my story. And indeed, this flyer is a reproduction of an original, like, rave flyer, which was very important to catch in those days. Like, the only way how to know about parties and to how to get in was to receive such a flyer. I think it looks very good in the design of Martin Groch. He designed both of the novels, so if he's listening, again, thanks so much for the beautiful design. I'm just going to read from the first page. Nothing left to dream. Climax, anticlimax, repetition, endless repetition, 1,000 plateaus of crescendo. You've been turned inside out, and all that was inside you swings from your arms, floating like paper streamers in the air. And now the wind has died down. Go sit somewhere. You don't feel it, but you can hardly stand. A quick calculation should convince your brain that you're tired. Go take a seat. You feel great. You eat an apple. The juice trickles down your chin. It's never tasted so intense. You show it to whoever is sitting next to you. Whoever is sitting next to you licks it off. You're surprised by the sudden appearance of a face in front of yours, a tongue protruding, growing in size, a formless sea creature. Then your own emerges, as if suddenly borne out on a strong, warm current. Your body tingles as your sliding tongues touch. The tongue is cold from the chilled Coke that just ran down it, but you don't taste the Coke. You taste the body. A drop falls onto your shoulder. You look up, but there's nothing there. The ceiling, collective sweat off the ceiling. You may as well rub it into your glowing skin, because if you don't sweat, use that of others. The girl sitting next to you recoils audibly from this act, which is both clever and disgusting. She presents you with a light, but it's difficult for you to put your cigarette to the flame. Your shoulders move mechanically, as they have been for hours, held by the music. You get up again, light as an empty cardboard box. You love this track, don't want to miss a thing. It's impossible, this. What is this? Who knows this track? Soon it's over with new beats undermining the previous ones, and you wanted to be part of it, to be lifted up, but every time you're too late. You wipe your hair from your face, keep dancing, repeating movements, always at the ready. One day you look the moment in the face, grab it by the cheeks. You stand with your eyes closed, seeing golden lights swirling in a deep purple tunnel. When you open them, the tunnel is gone, and you're among all those hot people again, all those steaming bodies. You feel their presence behind you, next to you, surrounding you without touching you. You reach up into the air, you rhythm machine, and the longer you keep doing this, the better it feels, air flowing underneath your wings. Sticky air, still air. Repeat. Fennis appears, this time t-shirtless. You stop, his appearance anchoring you in the room as if you're traveling between two layers of meaning from metaphor to appearance. A worn leather strap with a camera hanging from it wreathes his pale, hairless chest. At home, you twisted his hair into spikes with quivering blue gel, but the spikes are drooping now. A minute later, you're alone again. No, not alone because of all those bodies. The boy next to you makes eye contact. Bad teeth, bald head, happy, innocent and happy. You smile back at him before becoming a rhythm machine once again. A machine that doesn't produce anything, just desires. You pop a piece of chewing gum into your mouth. Feel the shell break, the freshness underneath. Just for a moment before it's crushed by your rhythmically moving jaws. Feel the fury, feel the fury. Two moist hands on your equally moist shoulders. Shall we go? I'm done here. All rolls used up. No, I don't want to. Don't want to stop. The wave returns, the sea creature moves. You kiss Fennis on the mouth, but he keeps his lips tight, offering you his stubbly cheek instead. You don't care. You take his face, turn it towards you, and push in your tongue. I want to go, Nim. He sounds annoyed. You know what he's thinking. It's always the same. I need to work tomorrow, he says, and so do you. I don't want you to go home on your own. Nim pulls her pants off her buttocks. Her short, shiny black pants look like underwear, riding up her buttocks until it itches. It's weird to see all those people dance, their eyes round, their bodies gleaming, jerking robotically to the booming music in the light of the stroboscope. No one looks at each other. Everyone stares ahead or has their eyes closed. They're frightful, these semi-dead. Everyone an island. Their imminent departure has split the crowd that felt like a single entity before, like soap does a layer of oil. Nim has no business in this surreality. She takes Fennis by the arm and pushes him ahead of her. After she's grabbed her leather shoulder bag from behind a speaker, she follows him out of the room. The cool air in the hallway makes her shiver. She quickly pulls a jumper out of her bag, filled with hairspray, deodorant, tights, CDs, other bag sediment, and rummages for her track pants. They're gone, but Fennis is already holding the door for her. Blinded by daylight, she cannot see a thing. There should be a pair of sunglasses in that bag. She scans the short queue by the entrance, checking people's shaven or spiky heads, oversized coats, leather trousers, leather pants, track pants, no pants, and lipstick that's already smudged. No one she knows. A girl in a marine blue bomber jacket looks suspiciously fresh. She's just spent the night in her bed and is now going to liven up the wallfish with her clean, wet hair. Nim makes eye contact with her as she passes, moving her arms to the heavy beat of the bass coming through the walls. The queue remains quiet, calm, focused, and reverential, as if there's something important to see in the distance. But the way they keep their knees still is just a little too forced. Fennis is waiting for her on the corner of the street, the hood of his jumper pulled over his head. He gently takes her by the elbow. You aren't wearing your trousers. That's right. He snorts. Come, the U8 doesn't stop here today. We need to walk to the Janowitzbrücke. His voice sounds as if it's coming from far away. Nim turns her head towards the entrance of the Walfisch. She's already sorry she gave in. She wants to go back inside, back into the womb of hell, the embrace of the dungeon, even though she knows it's better to leave early because she hates it when the party ends, when the lights are switched on, when the police arrive and there's silence, when the damp evaporates off the mirrors and the broom creates waves in the sea of cups and cigarette butts on the floor. The end, a moment that always threatens to break her heart. Everyone needs to stay together forever. So far, thank you very much.
Thank you, Persis. I just wanted to say that everyone visiting my book table, picking up the flyer, says, "Oh, I want to dance again," after such a long lockdown, which I understand. You should read the first chapter of the book too and compare it, because the strange thing is that it is in a way the same story, but it's written in a different area, a different time, and a different style. And that I'm going to read the rest of the book soon. Tomorrow we are here again with 3 writers, and we start with you. Sorry. Anja, sorry, yeah, thank you. And then we have Jamal, and then we have Gerda, and Amja Hassan, Gamal, and Gerda both all will read. And we have another book launch by a book Gerda made, who's the only one this year. So next year we have half a dozen of books which will come out from the writers this year. Hamja made a beautiful book, Shy Radicals, and he let me read his memoir, which will, I think it's this. Is it published, Hamja? In November, which I think was very well written. So I hope you will be there again tomorrow. I want to thank the Literature Foundation, who made not Inja's but Jentis and Persis residency possible. I want to thank my colleague Bruno and Anne van Gonsveld and the technicians, Amit Suleiman and Emile Chuang. And see you tomorrow.
If we have 15 extra minutes if you want to do a Q&A, otherwise we can move on to the next one. It's up to you.
How do you feel about the Q&A? It was
if someone wants to ask a question, we still have some time. If not, we make a break and you can ask questions outside and then come back for the next one. But we have a little bit of extra room if we want to have some conversation.
Well, I see Hamja.
Hamja. I'll give you.
Hi, Jente. It was when you read those section of writers' suicides. Does it make you not believe in the moral value of art, or that art has a redemptive process? You have all these grandiose curators and directors talking about how good it is for everyone to have creative pursuits, and yeah. Does Virginia Woolf's self-destruction or Sylvia Plath, they're people I loved and they have the same diagnosis as me too. How does it impact you? Yeah.
Yeah, well, I've written this purely from the perspective of the protagonist, and so her perspective is mostly about seen from the people that stay behind, and the child's perspective. So that's what I wanted to get across, how the people who ended their lives had children, how they stayed behind. But I'm not sure if I understood your question. Did I answer it? No.
I guess the character is, to what extent is it, do you have subjective views outside of the character's narrative in relationship to, because they're real life?
You want to know my perspective on Virginia Woolf's suicide?
All the ones you listed, like Anne Sexton, successively.
Yes, well, I cannot give you a clear answer on that. I mean, I haven't. So you mean an artist and
For
killing
example,
themselves?
a lot of social welfare programs and use the arts because they believe it's healing or good for society, and that's how creativity is portrayed by welfare states and public bodies. And I don't know, it certainly for me it makes me not believe in the positive healing potential of being creative or writing.
Oh, now I get it.
Yeah.
Yes. No, I don't think creating art is healing. No, I think consuming it can be. You're looking.
That's a brilliant direct answer.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you, Hamza. Anyone else? Marie. Yeah.
I really like all the readings. Thank you, guys. Ines, was there any clarity brought on the skeleton?
No, there was no clarity. I mean, I think I basically heard a list of every animal you could imagine as a possibility for these bones, ranging from horses to sheep to wolves to somebody's dog to, I mean, mythological creatures, and none of them were, in my opinion, right. But also, everybody said that the opinion of everybody else was also wrong. So no, I have no idea. But if you would want to examine the remains, you could just dig the hole again because it's still there.
Good to know, thanks. And I also have a question for Persis. I'm wondering that in the eyes of the recent situation, most clubs and raves and things have been closed for 15 months now in West Europe and about to reopen. Did that affect the change in this environment, like your process and your writing?
Yes, it did, I guess. I started writing this book when this wasn't a problem yet, and I understood. So my novel, I've tried to find a way of expressing a feeling of being stuck in a present that is permanently in crisis, and this feeling of like a repetition of the now, not moving forward. And in the rave, I found a way to tell this story both as a movement, like a historical movement that like maybe was the last movement to really like have this future feelings of like hailing the future somehow, without having clear like political ideas on what that future might look like. But there was this feeling of like, this is it, right? This is the new millennium. And at the same time, the rave is also an embodiment of this repetition of the present because of the repetitive music. Like it's always there, right? Every weekend again, you can go back in, and there's always this promise of endless nights, endless repetition, endless climaxes. So to give a bit of background, and then the lockdown happened, or the virus, and I guess the rave or the club or the dance floor as a symbol became more nostalgic, even like more historical than it was when I started writing it. So I had to relate to it in a new way, and then it also became a question of like, so now we have this pause, we have a caesura. What does it mean? What do I lack when I cannot go to the club? Is it really something that really sustains me or not? And I don't know, in a way, maybe it's too early for me to say what it really did to my writing, but I felt that it all became a bit more nostalgic, like darker. Yeah, and then, I guess it just all became a bit more dark and urgent to me, yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you, Marie. Anyone else? No. So I guess it's time for a break. Thank you, Persis, Ignace, Gente, Eric. See you tomorrow. And we'll be back at 8. It was supposed to be at 8:10, but maybe 20 minutes break is too much. So we start at 8, if that's okay. Yeah? Okay, if the guests are already there, we start at 8. If not, 8:10. See you in a bit then. And we'll have David Habit's performance, so make sure you come. Thank you very much. Everyone's excited for the second part of the public program, so welcome back. It's my pleasure to introduce to you David Habit, who is our current participant, Roman Fellow of this year. If you come to the Van Eyck, you'll see David's beautiful installation in the central staircase and also in his studio. And his presentation now will give like an extra layer, very extra and a very beautiful extra layer to his presentation in Open Studios. So I'll hand over to David Habets and his guests.
Thank you, Bruno. I actually feel super nervous today because I'm doing a public reading after just 3 very good writers did a reading that I was not aware of, that I was starting this. But today I want you to read lichen as drawings, and I brought a lot of the lichen that I've gathered over the years. And I look at this lichen as stories and as poetry and mostly as essays. And when I started the fellowship here, I just put them on the floor. This is just a fragment of it, as you see here. And I started to look for new ways to read them. But today I won't be doing that alone. I actually need the help of people in the audience. For this, I have a black cloth. I feel like a magician because you can basically change everything that you want all the time. But my arms aren't long enough. I'm not Frederik Willem Daan to reach to the other side of the table. So I need somebody else to lay out the lichen while I'll be reading a series of text. And I won't be doing that alone either. I invited 2 guests. I'm very honored that Laurens Sparrius is joining us. He's an ecologist and one of the lichen experts from the Netherlands. He works for the BLWG, which is the Lichen and Mosses Society, group of field biologists that have mapped not only the lichen, but also stories that they can tell us from ecological data. And I invited a very good friend, Cameron Hu. He's, among other things, an anthropologist, a writer, an art critic, and at the moment a postdoctoral fellow at the Konrad Lorenz Institute. But they will jump in later. First, I will start with 5 short stories. And they're part of a project that I started here, which is called We Are All Extremophiles. It is a bit aggressive and hard language because I think lichen are very beautiful, but they tell us terrifying stories of how we are polluting our landscapes, our environments, and our own bodies. They're a resemblance of our own bodies that are being sick. I went through a year of being very sick here at the Van Eyck. All the participants here in the audience know that. But I've made it true to start telling stories here. But first I want to show you that all these lichen are actually also personal stories and related to mostly holidays and projects that I worked on and places that I was. So this blue setup with mostly greenish, whitish lichen, they come from the canal on the Poteriestraat, the canal where we would walk a lot of mornings toward the Van Eyck. This is in the evening, that is what the sort of midnight blue shine over them takes. So these pictures also capture certain moods of how I was feeling while I was gathering these pictures. But one even more important one is one with my younger brother. It's from a long time ago. It's in Brittany in France, the place that we would go on holiday with my parents. and you see me and my younger brother standing in front of a large Paleolithic stone. And I'll first read a very short text called Petrified Time. In front of a boulder, 2 stories high, the impossibility of a menhir, of stone standing tall, my arm around my brother, the impossibility of friends born in the same bed, hair still blonde, turned dark, straight now curled. I am 1 head taller. Our head's length was still a measure of age. Our heads were measuring time, expanding slowly, learning ways of the world. Our heads the same size as the lichen covering this Paleolithic riddle. We were lesionizing time. The next one is about time and place, and it's mostly from a book I read called Lichen Biology 2.0. The 2.0 makes it very scientific, very precise, and it teaches me first that chlorolichen Nomycetes devonicus was found in Devon in rock over 415 million years old. These times before modern plants developed, the world looked very different. Ancient carpets of lichen covered whole lands, whole landscapes, most likely. They are bioindicators of disturbances in the landscape. The disappearance of glaciers, rock slides, river movements. After a major shift, if left undisturbed, they mark references of time. Porgramme, can you come forward to help me? Porgramme will lay out a couple of Rhizocapron geographicum pictures in a random fashion into the grid. Just play around. These deep time events that slip from our consciousness remind me of the words of Arne Næss, thinker of the ideas of deep ecologies. I watch Næss on YouTube, sitting in front of a boulder near his hut, the highest hut in Norway, he keeps on telling us, in which he wrote and lived in stillness most of his life. And Tvergastein, even from a distance of its mountain, Hallingskarvet, it looks greenish, but not clearly the green of grass. When observed closely, the green reveals innumerable patches of green lichen. Næss stands out against the fluorescent greenish yellow of Rhizocapron geographicus, and he reminds me of the life of a mountain and the life of stones. And he says to us, nevertheless, the surface of the most barren parts of the visible landscape of Hallingskarvet is alive, even in the narrow sense, consisting of organisms. Myriads of lichen are on every square foot. These lichen are strangely connected beings, algae intimately interrelated with fungi, intimately related, they're symbiotic. And he speaks of a still stranger connection. And I see algae, fungi, and Næss living together, algae, fungi, and us humans living together. And what they tell us is a story of loss. The next part is called Time Lost. Ticking seconds dissipate. They are not the loss of time I will be speaking of. I will not be speaking of clock time. That is just an activity of listening to the ticking of a clockwork. Thanks, Paul. This time is not lost. It's only mechanically flowing. Time is lost when measures of persistence, sublimated time, disappear. Think of an old tree that is being cut down in your street. It is a lifetime of loss. The disappearance of decade-old lichen in only a few years because of a new factory being built or a new fertilizer being used is the loss of a drawing of the ecological time in which we are immersed. We are surrounded by generations. We are surrounded by time, but we're blinded by the urgencies and the futures that we tell ourselves we have to keep on staring at. We have to look at what loss means in our now. Let me quote Helen MacDonald, author of Vesper Flights, a book I just got for my birthday because my niece is called Vesper. Small anecdote. When your experience of a wood that is made of light and leaves and songs becomes something less complex, less magical, just less, once the warbler birds or the lichen have gone, it is literature and the other arts that can teach us the qualitative texture of the world. We need to communicate the value of things, so more of us will fight to save complexity, to save magic. To look for more complexity, for more magic, I started my search for when the lichen project started here at the Van Eyck. The first thing I did, I went to a nearby petrochemical industrial terrain. Not the most logical thing to do, of course, when you start an art residency, but it is a former mine, the mine where my grandfather worked and lived. It is next to the village that I grew up, and I found it a fantastic idea to take this as a starting point to start looking for lichen and start looking for environmental stories that I could tell with lichen. And I had the idea to spend my year on a small hill next to an ammonium plant. The hill is called the Heksenberg, the hill of the witches. With the humming of the cooling towers in the back, I stepped into a woodland, a patch of leftover wood. It's centuries old, but as I walked into an epiphytic desert. 5 epiphyte desert. It's early April in the year 2020. It's unusually warm, around 22 degrees. Leaves unfold from their buds. I sink deep through my knees and make my way under the barbed wire. These woods are highly toxic. I'm not allowed to enter. I step unseen across a row of brambles into a small grove of trees, a patch of young maples, followed by a group of displaced firs. I've been spotting lichen every day for the last weeks, for the last months, and here I feel totally disillusioned. In between the bare trees, probably it's because I'm an amateur in most things that I do, also in looking for lichen. So walking in between these dense grounds where there is not much light, I was still longing to find lichen, but there were none left. The oaks and the beeches around me reached over 180 years up, their bark blank and clean. Through the stems, I saw the silhouette of the cooling tower again. The cooling tower stems from the coal mines opened in the south in 1921. When the coal mines opened, sulfur oxide filled the atmosphere from burning the coke coals taken from the depth. Tree bark turned into desert, an epiphytic desert. Lichen and mosses died away in a few years. The blank rind was left behind. Tree dwellers have gone. It's an uncanny feeling to not encounter the fabulous return of lichen that I imagined to be looking for in this project. It remains only as a drawing of their absence. I experience the absence of sublimated atmosphere, of materialized air, the loss of time being body. For lichen are rich worldings of the invisible, the ephemeral, and the unseen. They turn light and air into color in their mute poetics, their whispers, as Rowan Kimmerer taught me. They speak to us of the atmosphere that we breathe. And now I would like to invite Laurens Parius to tell a very different story, a way more serious story about how the Mosses and Lichen group in the Netherlands has been able to track and the huge variety that is in a country within the Netherlands where there is not even a university, a group that is interested in them. They've been doing work for the last 100 years. So I would like to invite Laurens, if it is possible.
All aspects of lichens and lichenology, the study of lichens. I'm a lichenologist, and I'm one of the actually 3, 4 lichenologists actually working in the Netherlands. but I'm working for a society, the Dutch Rhyological and Lichenological Society. We have 400 members, which are mostly amateur biologists. So they do the study of bryophytes, of mosses and lichens as a hobby in their spare time. And there are 400 of them. There are a couple of real experts, most of them not working at research institutes. And most of these people will go out in nature and look for mosses and lichens. And they will, and that's our aim of the society, collect data using apps and, for example, field guides, books with images of all the species and descriptions of them. They will record what they see and submit them to the society. And we produce maps and trends of the species, how nature is doing. Part of this we do as a citizen science project. So one of the species that is in David's work is Xanthoria parietina, yellow lichen, and that's on the orange side of this card. There's also a blue side, and all the species on the orange side are yellowish or small and gray, and they grow on trees. And these lichens are all indicators of air pollution. And David already told about the epiphytic deserts at the end of the poem, of the story. Almost 30 years ago, if you went outside, if you looked outside your home on a tree along the road where you live, in the neighborhood, there would be almost no lichens. They were simply absent because of a lot of acid rain coming from the industry and cars. And this disappeared in the 1990s, and lots of lichens returned. They were absent for almost a century from the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, and they returned in every part of the country. But different species appeared than a century ago, and it's based on the remaining pollution by nitrogen. That's now a big topic in the Netherlands. Nitrogen from agriculture, from cows, from pigs. They produce ammonia, and they fertilize not only the place where they are, but also the entire countryside and even nature. And when this pollution source is present, you find yellow lichens on the trees. And so that's one of the big research topics that I'm also working on, to investigate the changes in these yellow lichens, and also in the pollution sensitive species such as oak moss, which are large scrubby lichens. And lichens also are a unique kind of organism. They are built of two organisms, actually. It's a symbiosis, and the symbiosis means that two organisms live together, and they both profit from this cooperation, from the symbiosis. So we have a fungus, which is related to mushrooms, and we have algae, which is related to the green stuff that you get on the pavement in your backyard in the wintertime. And when the fungus and the alga meets, you get a lichen. And you have, of course, several unique combinations, but most lichens are very strong organisms, even though they are thin as paper. And they can live over a century if the conditions around them don't change. So all the change that people cause on the environment will also make change the lichens around us. Yeah, and that's part of my work to show all these changes and to I hope that this will make people think about the environment and will make the air cleaner and people better. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Laurens. I will continue on this, but I want to say how special that sort of citizen science project that you guys are running. So all people that are interested, or I know a lot of people that didn't know what was a lichen, what a lichen was before I started here. I hope to have interest them to photograph them themselves and let them have a determination of what they find. And through that, we actually build up sort of a system of seeing how the world is changing together. Very physical, very colorful, very bright. For the next part, I want to ask Inyas and Gamal together to lay out a quite large amount of lichen. So there's 3 stacks. Please start with the greenish side and then move on to the yellowish orange. They're the same lichen but in different conditions. One is very wet, the other became very dry and sunny. So, and I will read the main text called "We Are All Extremophiles." 200 years ago, this lichen was pressed into this folio. Its name is Xanthoria parientina. 10 generations have passed since Franquinet collected the specimen in Maastricht. He was a young pharmacist, son to early industrialist from Verviers. Their family mill on the River Maas has disappeared. Its industrial legacy remains drawn into the body of this very same lichen. Franquinet and his ami de séance Lettré ranked his collection among the cryptogame, cryptic halflings disputed between plant and fungi. They are the earliest recognition of symbionts. Over the last decades, we have come to know our own body as symbiotic, as forms of living together, intimately tuned to the world around. Lichen have drawn the atmosphere we exhaled. I want you to see lichen forever differently, to read them as atmospheric history, as drawings of how we came to where we are now, and sketches of where we are going. To see lichen alike ourselves, we are all extremophiles. Let us look more closely at Franquinet's Xanthoria, isolated on a tabula rasa, stick to a clean sheet of paper in an attempt to make sense of a wondrous living world. Its body contains all the mental and physical pollution of the early 19th century. 5 generations later, by now, industries are on high speed. Seams of fatty coal have been discovered in the underground, in ancient bands from the carbone. Plant life from only 150 million generations back. The coking plants turned its geology into atmosphere. Time is gassing out into a new chemistry, sublimated into fertilizer, force-feeding a green revolution. Fields are tripping under high dosage. Monolithic crops force-feed our welfare. It is in these white mountains of artificial guano, stored away safe in nitrified shelters, flocked by cranes above all the death in the underground. It is in this landscape that our love for nitrogen was invented, with all the best intentions, to force stability onto a continent under a setting sun that drew the world into total industries, to have control over every amount with highly efficient measures by its own units of production. Its runoff has been deadly selective, providing a living only for those capable of coping with its extremes. Life became a monoculture. It's the Haber-Bosch process that allowed us to produce without the free-living, nitrogen-fixing bacteria. Haber and Bosch received the Nobel Prize for enabling their correction, as the Nobel statement reads. The scale of their inventivity caused dead zones, landscapes suffocating on nitrate, auf stikstof zur aziot, zones devoid of life, zones in hypoxia, dying for oxygen. Like us, Xanthoria thrives in these places. It scribes our addiction for nitrogen onto any surface, in its bright yellows and oranges. 2 generations pass, it's the swinging 60s by now. The mines are closing, a high price paid for its coal, giving birth to an age of organic petrochemistry, leaving behind an epiphytic desert, all trees bare, stripped of their life by a poisonous atmosphere. In this industrial abyss, a Roman Catholic art academy was founded. When the building first opened, people stood wondering whether it was another laboratory. Consecrated by the bishop, the chaplain of social works, Van Eyck still houses in this cloister of new objectivity. Light, space, air flow through the building. Energy dissipates as if there's an endless supply. Dark edges outline the windows. Against the spotless, hygienic white walls of modernity, glass is still thin, as see-through as glass can be. It's a rootless substrate of what has proven itself by now to be a sterile world, a blueprint of an age of optimism that in hindsight looks self-destructive. Now, as 7 generations have passed, there's another Green Deal, an experiment of art in changing atmospheres to survive in an abyss of a new biochemical age, while the former mines still nitrify the sky. Industry experiments with isolating life into its very molecular scripture. On an unsurmounted scale, on uncontaminated glass sheets covered with reproducible transparent gelatines, affording an isolated nature, to be nothing more than an output of abstract chemical relations, a tabula obedience for life to grow upon. On these ruins, Xanthoria flourishes. 10 generations have passed since Franquinet pressed this lichen into this folio. Old ruined walls are the root of the word parietina. The lift, the coming of age, is rooted in this very pigment called parietine. Xanthoria, paradoxically, tells a story of slowness. Its nitrophilic orange is made by both algae and fungi as a symbiotic metabolic. Parietine grows in slowness. It is complicated to isolate and extremely difficult to reproduce at high speed. It is an anti-industry, covering the ruins of our past. Within our bodies, this orange suppresses a protein called 6-PGD, slowing down the growth of cancer cells. The gentle pace of its chemistry counterintuitively slows down the speed at which chemistry itself can be scaled. Within 200 years, within 10 generations of Xanthoria passing by, it slows down the self-destructive isolation of our lives. We have always been extremophiles. Next up, I want to ask Cameron to appear on the screen and tell us not only of the destructive power of chemistry, but of all sciences. Cameron, live from Vienna. Thank you for being here.
I'm not a lichenologist, though I've learned to wish that I were now. David Hobbit's We Are All Extremophiles is a 200-year-long enterprise. 200 years is a short time, given what we currently think time is. At the end of the 19th century, as a surging industrial capitalism was carving more and more lives into discrete units of equivalent productive time, time that could be valued so that growth could happen, an annuidium of growth dissimilar from that of lichen, the growth of corporations, the growth of nations that had come to see themselves as economies. At this moment, there occurred another related revolution in time, and it was most evident in the sciences of natural history. They redescribed the present as a mere instance drowned within these enormous confounding, unfathomable oceans of time, duration spreading out behind us and in front of us, all the way to a limit and then beyond it. These were the sciences of geology, of environmental biology, and so on. These sciences would invite us to see what was before our eyes as brief and transient events within a prolonged series, one thing after another, ad infinitum. The sciences now allowed me to say, for example, the following very marvelous sentence, which I could not say if I were alive in 1800, that lichen has fixed nitrogen on Earth for as many as 2 billion years. 2 billion. 200 years is a short time. And seeing time this way, some humans came to see their lives differently. Human action was less and less the substance of time itself. If the sense of past and future once flowed from their lives and actions, now these new sciences were placing them within longer and longer timescales. 200 years, 2 to 3 human lifespans in sequence became all of a sudden a very short time when measured against processes unfolding over millions, hundreds of millions, and then billions of years. The historical sciences that reduced the human story to one story among stories, sciences that now allow me to admire the enduring reign of lichen on this planet, their advent is often recounted as a triumph. It is often understood to be the final unveiling of the truth of time. It is often said that those who don't acknowledge this truth are pathetic, residual, or holdouts. One might also note that these sciences don't consist just of facts, elongated into sentences that are happily stored in our heads. They consist of activities and powers intimately connected to those facts. Many of those activities and powers are more difficult to celebrate. You might note, for example, that the geological sciences massively enabled the location of petroleum, the spoliation of coal mines globally. They drew imperialists worldwide to unleash those materials that, as David writes in his poem, still nitrify the skies, which is to say, under a certain description, to feed the lichen. So the ability to luxuriate in the vastness of things is interestingly connected to the ability to ruin things on a very large scale. It seems likely to me that those abilities can't be separated. I think they come forever joined, and like a sort of show. Nietzsche, who I hate, elaborates the question of ambivalence that is registered in David's lichen, David's whole project, maybe David's mode of life as far as I know David. It might be possible, Nietzsche writes, that what constitutes the value of these good and revered things is precisely that they are insidiously related to, tied to, and even involved with those wicked, seemingly opposite things, maybe even one with them in essence. The state of affairs is worse in a way than if things were merely, transparently, and simply bad, because then we could banish them at no cost at all. That our way of knowing things is wildly ambivalent, that it combines wonder and violence is somewhat more difficult to consider. But I take some solace from the following. We've lived inside this new language of time, a language for marveling and a language for destroying, for less than 200 years, 191 to be exact. Charles Lyell published his Principles of Geology in 1830. It was from Lyell's principles carried throughout American and European empires by mining geologists and petroleum explorers. It was from these that we first received a lesson in how little time 200 years was in the scope of the species and the scope of the planet. It is interesting to think that this idea of time, with all of its ambivalence, with all of the violence it's connected to, has not yet endured as long as 10 generations of Xanthorrhea feasting on the leavings of industrial capitalism. I would wager, if I were a betting man, that this image of time will soon itself obsolesce, be replaced with another, with other connected powers, with other ambivalent consequences. It won't be very long now, I think. David Hobbits, physicist, architect, an artist, now a sort of unhinged lichenologist, also an exemplary extremophile himself, has presented us with the ever-blooming lesson of Xanthorrhea. And the lesson I've taken is that if 200 years is a short time, then that shortness might be mercy, and that shortness might be grace. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Cameron. Especially the ambivalence that you bring to this. And I think we're here a society of ambivalences here at the Van Eyck. We discuss rave parties sort of as a new way of aiming yourself into the future, but having no political stance or viewpoint, but only the aim of prolonging a future that has to be prolonged because you're in crisis and you need to get out of it. And you need to dance yourself to pieces to reinvent yourself. or digging a hole that seems pointless until you hit a layer of clay that starts bubbling, and sort of the sorrow that was in your heart starts bubbling out slowly. But the activity itself seemed pointless to start with, or even pointless to call art in the first place. I want to end the reading. I think, like 7 minutes left with the place that I started. The first lichens that I found, I didn't at all find no lichens at all. For some reason, the images. Yes, it works again beautifully. And I would like to ask Marie to lay down the last pictures. These are the first lichen that I found, and this is the last text that I wrote. And I want to thank Asha Karami a lot. It is in Dutch. It won't be in English. I didn't translate it. It's a short poem, and I don't think I could translate it into English. But it's called A City of Air, een stad van lucht. Kosmossen tekenen lucht. Ze vouwen en voegen tijd, jaren, decennia, zelfs eeuwen aan atmosfeer. Ontvouwen zich voor diegene die ze leert lezen. Kosmopolitaan wilde ik worden, om metropolen te zien. In onbegrijpelijke weefsels van textuur en kleur tekenen ze de lucht die wij ademen. Hyperventilerend leven we voort, in onze vliegensvlugge dromen. Terwijl de wereld om ons verstikt, met longen volgezogen verstikken we in onze eigen zorgen. Onze ademteugen zijn een lichaam, een gevoelige symbiose van eukaryoten, levend van lucht. Ademen wij het vuil, onze vervuiling. Er is leven in de wolken. Ze animeren, brengen tot leven het ons dat we aarde noemen. Een gegeven dat me blijft fascineren. Levende cellen die wolken bewonen. Hoe efemeer ze mogen wijzen. Ze dragen het leven microscopisch klein. In het matte licht dat op ons schijnt. In regendruppels, bacteriën, algen en schimmels dalen neer. Ze sublimeren het onzichtbare. Hygiënometrie werden ze genoemd. De kosmossen van Parijs in 1866. In een stad die buitenlucht schilderde. Een modernisme groeide van dunne kost tot obsessie, met het steriele, het schone, ontdaan van elke holte, iedere concaaf, een wereld zonder abys, waar het onzichtbare leven zou kunnen nestelen. Een transparante droom. Ze ligt nu heilig, verscholen onder smok, onder verontrusting, onder verhalen van een veranderende atmosfeer, verloren in het overschot dat we accumuleerden, omdat alles daarvoor was vergaan. Het leven van deze stad, levend van lucht, niet het luchtledige, maar van de lucht van ons aardsubstraat. Deze metropolis is de abyss, een involutie van samenleven. Het fout en ademt ruimtes, waarin wij een eigen leven kunnen leiden. Met iedere ademteug bewegen we een halve liter lucht. We inhaleren en doordrenken ons bloed met hetgeen om ons heen. Ons diafragma perst wereld samen op microscopische blaasjes tot een hechte innerlijke korst. Lucht die ons binnenstroomt is anders dan adem die ons verlaat. Iedere ademtocht is een metamorfose van de bel om ons heen. Het ademen van de wereld maakt ons tot homeostaat. Ademhaling heeft lucht doen ontstaan. Meer dan een verhouding alleen, lucht is een dans van moleculen, van stikstof, koolstof en dioxide, een leven vol fijnstof, ammonia en microscopische plasticiteit. We ademen de compost van vergane industrie, kosmossen tekenen, atmosferische archeologie. Historische lucht als geest van wereld voor Anaximines, geest, ziel en lucht als één ambigu element, van pneuma, spirit en air. Natuur was stoffelijk. Adem en lucht één. Deze verheven lucht houdt ons bij elkaar. Iedere teug verbindt mijn bloed aan de atmosfeer. Aan het oriool dat onze aarde omsluit. Iedere teug transformeert de allesomvattende lucht om me heen. Een lokale allesomvattendheid. Als winterse kou waar mijn adem op beslaat. Thank you very much everybody for listening.
much, David. Thank you, Cameron. And Lawrence, and we have some time for Q&A, so feel free to raise your hands and ask David or Cameron, Lawrence.
Cameron and Lawrence won't be
Ah,
answering questions.
so
I think
just
only
ask
if they really want to, they can raise their hands because now they're on the screen again.
Or if Cameron and Lawrence want to ask questions too, they can also ask questions. Nice to meet you, both.
Thank you so much for contributing. It was really beautiful. Thank you.
I think everyone's getting their breaths back after that presentation. Should we end it there? Yeah? Good. Thank you so much, David. That was beautiful. Also, thank you, Logans and Cameron, for your beautiful presentations too, and for being here digitally in the Jan van Eyck. I hope you can come visit David's installation and everyone else's work. Wow, thank you so much, everyone, for showing up and for being such a good, warm crowd. Thank you for all of those who are watching this from their home or that will watch it later, many years later, maybe 200 years later. We don't know.
There has to be another Louisa in the archive, going through the archive to bring up.
Yes, you're talking to that person right now. Tomorrow we'll be back in the same place at the same time. So from 7 to 9, make sure you come join us for one more session of the Writers Program and for a performance of Emilia Taprist. My name is Bruno. I'm the curator of Jan van Eyck, and I'll see you tomorrow.